Then at the upper hole, Scott held a funnel filled with fine powder while Dunlap applied the air pump at the hole below. By the draft thus created, the powder was drawn into all the little crevices between the heavy doors and the frames of the safes. Then a little pistol loaded simply with powder was attached near the upper hole and by a string tied to the trigger, discharged from a safe distance above. There were several attempts made before the complete explosion was effected, but finally the safe was blown open and their contents secured. The robbers making good their escape, $120,000 in money and about $700,000 in bonds. Okay, we've got that. Do we have to go through a little farther, folks? Let's just do about 12 minutes here. Talks about how they made a fortune. We're still not getting to the point where the detective and the arrest work was done. Okay, finally we're getting to it here. Evans. Coming in his confession to the Northampton bank robbery, Evans said that the gang had considered making an attempt there for several months before the robbery was actually executed. For the first time they had designed to rob the First National banks. Evans abandoned some things. Enjoying the fullest confidence of the Northampton bank officers, Evans had made the repeated visits to the bank and had gained important information for his associates. It was through his influences the bank directors decided to give the whole combination of the vault to the cashier, Witchley, who had previously been entrusted only with half of it, the remainder of the half of the combination being given to one of the clerks. Now, on the night of the robbery, Evans was in New York, but he had gone to Northampton a day or two after, as already stated. Then for the first time he realized what was immensely wrong, and suffering would be inflicted upon innocent people by the robbers. And he said it was this that he had prompted him in his own efforts to have the securities restored to the owners. Returning to New York, he at once communicated with Scott Dunlap by means of the Herald Personals that he had several interviews with them in the city during the month of February. While they were anxious to dispose of the securities, it was plain from the first that they distrusted Evans and proposed to lessen his share of the profits. While pretending to approve the steps he was taking for a compromise with the bank, they were really, without his knowledge, carrying on secret negotiations with the same object. The suspicion on either side grew until finally it could no longer be concealed. Meeting Scott in Prospect Park sometime after the robbery, Evans said, "When are you going to settle and give me my share?" "You'll never get a cent," answered Scott. "You've given the whole gang away." For some time they did not meet again. Evans continued his vain efforts for a settlement, growing more and more anxious as the months went by, and he saw the danger to himself become more threatening. On the 9th of November, he met Scott, Dunlap, and Red Leary on the outskirts of Brooklyn, and a violent quarrel occurred about the division of the spoil. Reproaches and threats were exchanged with stormy language, and at one time Evans' life was actually in danger. Well, anyway, instead of reading this word by word, basically what has happened is the Pinkerton detectives kind of put two and two together. They got this all rounded up, followed these guys around, put pressure on one of them. One of them cracked. He told what he knew. There was actually these guys were jailed. Now, one guy broke out of jail by, actually a prison, apparently. No, it was a jail. He went upstairs, pretended like he was going to the bathroom. His friends had dug the bricks to the side of the wall up there for him. He got out, and then this was at night, and the night watchman, apparently in those days you just left your cell, went to the bathroom, came back. The night watchman wondered, well, where is he? Went up, he sees a hole in the wall, and the guy got away. But these Pinkerton guys were pretty tough dudes. They weren't beyond pistol whipping a man. Apparently there was never any charges brought against them. They caught this guy in a carriage. One guy grabbed the horse, the other guy grabbed the criminal before he could grab his revolver. He was arrested, and they talk about things about how he's going to pick up a brick and throw it, and that was about it. Well, folks, this is just a little taste of what it was like way, way back in the day. You have these private, just like now, we have private prisons that don't do a very good job, exceed themselves, give rotten food, and sure, they make a nickel for their masters, but they don't do real corrections at all. Same back with these Pinkertons. They weren't really police. They weren't sheriffs. They weren't any kind of a posse. They weren't deputized. They were just a bunch of real cunning guys who liked to catch criminals, and sometimes they would pistol whip or hit or lie or cripple, or so far they haven't killed anybody, but they got the job done. The criminal got it put behind bars, and if there was any money, it got returned to the people who were robbed. So I'll leave it to you to think about what does that mean to you as far as what it was like back then. Now, after this episode, we're going to go back to the regular prison news where we take snippets of prison news, either now, which comes out every morning, or then, back some time ago, what inmates were up to. And little by little, as you listen to these broadcasts, you will get a mindset of how these articles are written. Like when they quote sources, well, what sources and who's going to, quote, conduct an investigation now that the cat's out of the bag or the horse is out of the barn or the inmate's out of the cell and he's running for his life or running for escape. How can you just quote a source? Who is responsible for that inmate getting out? How does contraband get brought into a prison, a jail, or a penitentiary? Can you tell me? Well, if you followed along, you know that they're using drones now. Of course, they're always using pack mules, like somebody's wife or sister coming to visit, try to pass something off. Corrupt guards and food service personnel is always a good one. Some guys have taken crossbows and shot dope on the tip of a crossbow arrow, tried to shoot it over the wall. Drones now, I'm told. Well, we did an article about this, if you've listened to us here on the broadcast. Guys have flown a drone over the wall and just landed it, or crashed it somewhere, and on there was 2 or 3 cell phones, which are worth a ton of money in prison. They charge inmates for phone calls, plus sometimes if the truth comes out, it's not good for the institution. Other time it's not good for the inmate, so it's a draw. Some of the more advanced drones apparently drop their payload, and the inmate has to next morning has to go out in the yard and try to find it. Hope somebody else doesn't find it first, whether it's drugs or cell phones or possibly even a weapon of some sort. You don't know what they're dropping out there. And we have some guys running podcasts from prison. Just a couple days ago, I did a podcast where inmates were somehow they got somebody to sign off on this, some of the people there, and they were running a podcast for a month long. They had another guy who was a non-offender who was doing the mix down or the technical work. Here at a place like this, there's no studio. I don't have a mixing booth. I don't have a computer. I don't have a special microphone. I'm just putting it out. But apparently these guys have all that. They're going to do this prison podcast. I think it was called Ear Hustle was the name of it. Kind of hard to find, but as podcasts become more and more clever about getting their stuff out, it may be easy to look them up. For instance, here at Prison News, if you try to type Prison News podcast, half the things you won't find us on, and they come up on other things. Well, that's great. I guess if we wanted to pay a little bit more money, we could get listed with iTunes, which is not the goal here in any way, shape, or form. And some of the podcasts are listed on multiple things, but not on other things. One of the podcasts we do, which is on a new thing called Anchor, not Spreaker, where we're at now, but Anchor, Anchor. These guys give you a 5-minute free podcast. And to get them, you have to download the app, or someone needs to actually, at this moment, send you the link to a specific podcast. So it's becoming more and more restricted to the individual podcast holder, if you will, or the farm where these things are kept. Well, live and learn. Podcast, it started out when people didn't want to use a phone when the phones first came out. Then they didn't want to have a TV set in the house when the TVs first came out. Then when computers came, they said, I don't want a computer. And once they finally browsed the web, they said, I'm not going to do email. And the ones that were quick adopters went kind of forward. The guys that didn't said no. Well, then it went up to cell phones. You're going to have I'll have a cell phone. Are you going to make a YouTube channel? Yes or no? Well, right now, we're right on the edge for socially communicating of what we call the podcasts. They're kind of a new thing. A lot of guys are scared of them. They're not easy to work. Often they're not easy to set up. And they're more work and they're hard to monetize. This one's not monetized. This is just done to kind of help you understand about what's going on with inmate life, tell you a little bit about the gospel, tell you that there's a way out, that from day one, Jesus Christ, the disciples, Moses trying to get away from the Egyptians, criminal behavior, the whole thing is laced through with prisons, with people being chained, falsely accused, beating the rap, and ultimately doing the right thing. So we want to talk to you about that, and also about the born-again experience. We're not coming from the bar Jesus or the Jesus from Waco, Texas. We're talking about the guy that got crucified on a cross for you, bled, died, and let's see, third day he rose again. Third day he rose again. Now he's alive. He's way far away up in heaven, but not so far away you can't trust him and become born again by receiving the work he did, and understanding that there's a place hot called hell, and you're not going to hell, you're going to heaven when you become born again. Things like that. If you want to find out more about it, read your Bible cover to cover. An old Bible, either the King James Bible or the Geneva Bible. If you can't take that Old English, then get you a Webster Bible, written by, was it Noah Webster, I believe, the guy that wrote the dictionaries. Don't get a new Bible. Don't you dare get something that was printed in World War I or after that in the United States. Those are called corrupt texts. Well, they got the gender-neutral stuff, trying to feminize the gospel, feminize the Word of God, remove the blood atonement of Christ, not be born again, exalt Mary worship, the whole thing on these new Bibles. Stay with an old one. Stay with the type of manuscript that people got burnt at the stake for. Now, I know that King James Bible wasn't used when they got burnt at the stake that much. You had like the, I can't think of the name of those guys that had by Wycliffe Bible and stuff. But if a man can get burnt at the stake because he believes the Bible, what Christ did, that's the Bible you want. Not a new one with somebody who's got a degree behind their name and wants to rewrite things to do a social maladjustment. Okay, folks, that's about it. Take care. God bless you. I'm going to go ahead and snap off now, and we'll see you later. Now, again, we're going to get back to the regular broadcast. This is just prison news. We read some stuff about the Pinkertons. For me, that was hard reading. That's about the last one of these I'm going to do. It moves along slow. Geez, the guys never get around to catching the criminal. But it's good for us as time goes on to see the genesis, if you will, of the current state of corrections in the United States and Canada. God bless all of you. It's time to go ahead and ring that prison bell. You don't mind, do you? Bye for now. Yeah.